The Indianapolis Colts got busy on the first day of free agency, transforming their secondary while also saying goodbye to a couple stalwarts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the night. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $200 in bonus bets when you hit your first $5 bet. So my name is Zach Hicks, everyone, your resident film nerd of horseshoehuddle.com. I'm having the best day ever right now with these new guys that are being brought into the Indianapolis Colts. And as always, I'm joined by our credentialed boots on the ground, Jake Arthur. We've upgraded him from Crocs to boots because he's wading through the gorgeous mess that is today of free agency. and it's not a mess today, actually. It's great news today. We're going to kick it off just covering everything Colts free agency, which for the first time in the Chris Ballard era, I think, Jake, we have a lot of news today when it comes to the first day of tampering. So we're going to talk about what's next for the Colts. We're going to talk about Colts players that are leaving for new and higher places. But first, let's talk about these big signings, Jake. We've done Locked On Nows for the site, for the channels here, so you guys have seen our quick reaction. But Charvarius Ward, 3 years, $60 million, $35 million guaranteed, which that's actually really great guaranteed money there on a 3-year deal. That's only a little over $10 million per year guaranteed on Ward. I think that's great signing for the Colts. And then 4 years, $60 million on Camryn Bynum, the safety from Minnesota. Jake, just your instant reaction to Chris Ballard completely changing his entire philosophy overnight and signing these two big name free agents.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got to hand it to Chris. He went from we like our guys to, hit the road, basically. And you and I are both, we're not just, this isn't going to be revisionist history. We're both on record saying we wanted both of these guys. I've done 2 free agency big boards, and both Ward and Bynum were on both editions. You've talked about both guys recently, so you and I are over the moon about this. These guys have relatively good age. Ward's I think is going to be 29, Bynum 28. He's 27 right now.
27 for Bynum. Yep.
Both their birthdays are before the season. But no, 4-year deal, 3-year deal. I like this a lot. It completely transforms the secondary. Not only puts the Colts had decent players in some of those spots, but now those players are like important depth. Because Charvarius Ward, you've got a guy who has been an All-Pro. I think he's got 2 Super Bowls. He's been to a few at minimum, but he's got that pedigree that you're looking for. He's the big, long corner with decent athleticism, knows how to take the ball away. We've seen him perform really well, locking down really good receivers in big moments. And then Camryn Bynum, he's just a ball hawk. Like he basically burst onto the scene this year because he was taking the ball away so much that he was starting to be known for his celebrations. So this guy knows how to take the ball away as well. Lou Anarumo did a radio hit during the combine, and he said they were really looking for someone in the back end that could take the ball away, and they found it really in both of these guys. So they got ball hawks, they got size, they got guys from really good environments. Obviously with Bynum, the Vikings have had some success recently, but Kevin O'Connell in general runs a really good program there. And then Charvarius Ward comes from the Chiefs and then the 49ers. So all he knows is success. So I'm over the moon about these moves. I don't really think they could have had a better start to free agency.
Yeah, I mean, just to start with Charvarius Ward, this was a guy we've been talking about for a couple weeks now on how it was just the perfect fit for the Colts in terms of what they're looking for on the outside, what fits Lou Anarumo's system, kind of what they need. I mean, they have not had a bona fide cornerback one in the Chris Ballard era outside of the one season we got with Stephon Gilmore, and that was in the disastrous 2022 season. So aside from that, they really haven't had that legit number one lockdown guy. And that's what Charvarius Ward is. He is a guy who can be a number one corner. I know last year wasn't the perfect season for him, but he dealt with some injuries. He dealt with one of the worst personal tragedies that you can ever deal with as a parent. He went through just a tough time last year. He gets a fresh start in a new place, and he can get back to being the dominant corner that he was in a system that'll let him be that number one corner. So this was just a perfect fit on paper. It was always a perfect fit too in terms of if Chris Ballard was going to swing on a player, he was going to swing on a guy like this. Coming from San Fran, he has signed so many San Fran guys over the years. And then also before that, Ward came from the Chiefs, where Chris Ballard obviously has his connections and his roots with the Kansas City Chiefs. So Ward was just kind of the perfect conglomeration of everything that the Colts were looking for. But Camryn Bynum, I think if you're just looking at the personality and the person as well as what he brings to the team, was also kind of the perfect fit for the Colts. I mean, he's a versatile chess piece on defense that can play in the box, play over top. He was a corner in college as well that moved to safety in the NFL. So you just got this like ultimate chess piece that can take the ball away. And then just by all accounts from that Vikings locker room, a leader, a personality that was beloved in that locker room, who really grew alongside Harrison Smith, one of the all-time greats at safety in the past like decade. Not all time, but like one of the best safeties of the past decade or so in the NFL. So Bynum, it just seems like he's the perfect kind of culture and player guy that they were looking for on the market. So yeah, Chris Ballard is taking a big risk here. Obviously, anytime you spend a ton of money on the open market for anybody, it is risky. It's very risky. But at the end of the day, with the state of this secondary and what they wanted to do next season with the secondary, they needed to take a big swing. Like, you couldn't be this multiple press heavy, single high like type of defense that they wanted to be next year with guys like Jalen Jones, Samuel Womack, Rodney Thomas as like your best starters. You needed to bring in top level guys and kind of Ward was an all-pro 2 years ago. Bynum is an ascending player. Like, these are guys who they make Jalen Jones your worst starter in your secondary, or Nick Cross your worst starter in your secondary. That's doable. That's fine. You can run your multiple defense that way. You couldn't run it with those guys being your top starters, but those guys being your worst starters in your secondary, perfectly fine. It's kind of like with offensive line where you're only as good as your weak link. So like if a guy like say like on your offensive line, if like Will Fries is your best player, that's a concern. But if Will Fries is your weakest link, that's awesome. That's awesome for your O-line. It's the same thing with the secondary. Jalen Jones as your best player, that's concerning. Jalen Jones as your worst starter, all right, let's go. So I love this signing just in terms of adding talent, adding experience, adding a veteran presence to the secondary. And I think Ward and Bynum are going to just pay immediate dividends for this defense.
I agree. I mean, think of it this way. So you've got Bynum at the back end now with Nick Cross being able to freely do his thing there. But in the secondary, who's going to win between Jalen Jones and Juju Brents? Probably Jones. I mean, we don't know.
Womack as well. Womack as well. Yeah.
But the point is, like, now you can afford injuries. You can afford to have camp battles. Guys aren't going to win just because they have a pulse. Like, you're looking at Kenny Moore in the nickel, Ward on the outside, and Jones or probably Brent's one of the two there with Womack as like your fourth guy. Like, Womack this year is now basically what your Dallas Flowers was. Like, they have upgraded big time in the secondary. And I love that you mentioned Bynum's versatility as well, because that was one of Julian Blackmon's calling cards earlier in his career. But now you've got it in a different scheme that should really shine a light on that versatility. And I mean, again, you've now got a guy that can wear a bunch of different hats. You can be multiple, like we've heard the Colts and Lou Anarumo say numerous times now since he's come on. So, I mean, they've got more work to do, but so far what they want to accomplish with this defense, they have way better tools to do it now.
Yeah, and then real quick before we get out of this first segment here, they also restructured Braden Smith to bring him back at right tackle, or I think it was a renegotiated deal. So they will be saving money on that renegotiation. We don't know the details yet because technically the new league year hasn't started yet. It starts on Wednesday, so that's when we'll know. And then obviously the biggest move of the day for the Colts, they brought back Ashton Dulin on 2 years, $8.5 million. Now, I will say to anyone who's upset about this, 2 years up to $8.5 million. I guarantee it's like 2 years, like $4.5 million or $5 million, with some incentives that could get up to $8.5. Great special teamer, great wide receiver 6, perfectly fine there. But obviously, Ward and Bynum, these are the two biggest deals that Ballard's ever given out in free agency, both in the same free agency period. And you were talked about before we jumped on, Jake. I don't want to take this segment too long, but a 4-year contract for a player from Ballard,
he doesn't do that.
He barely does that in-house, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes to show they truly believe this guy is still ascending, like you said, and that he's going to be around for the long haul. And just a little footnote on Doolin. Someone mentioned, can you imagine if this was the first move that was announced? But honestly, look at it this way. You just locked up one of the best gunners in the game of football. So, sure, he's not a game-breaking receiver, but you just locked up for 2 more years an all-pro special teamer. That's a great move.
Two all-pros signed today, baby. Charvarius Ward and Ashton Doolin. That's killing it today, Chris.
Could have done much worse. But yeah, coming up, there's some good, and now it's time to get a little sad and say goodbye to a couple guys. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. But now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today, right now. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so that you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, so you got some good, you got some sad now. The Colts said goodbye to a couple stalwarts. Ryan Kelly, who was the Colts' longest tenured player, goes back to the Ryan Grigson era. Was the Colts' first-round pick back in 2016. A guy who, when they drafted him, it wasn't sexy to draft offensive linemen, but God, was it a relief because it finally showed the Colts were serious about getting better at offensive line, and he helped usher in a whole new era. That line before Kelly got to Indy was a joke. So you got Kelly, you add Quentin Nelson, but now the time has come. Ryan Kelly is over 30 years old. He has struggled with injuries through his career, has had some concussions, has only, I think, had 3 full seasons out of 9 years. So it was time. The Colts had Tanner Bortolini that they drafted in the 4th round last year. And good for Ryan. He gets a good deal to go to the Minnesota Vikings. 2 years, $18 million with $9 million guaranteed. Awesome. Hate that he couldn't finish his career in Indy, but again, it was time. That they have a plan in place to move beyond, and it was just time for both sides to kind of part ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ryan Kelly, we get stuck at sometimes in the when it's time to move on from a player, we forget how good their career was with the team.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say Kelly's a lock for the Ring of Honor because the Colts have a very storied history.
Pretty
Obviously,
damn close.
It's tough, but I think you would consider him as a Ring of Honor type player. He's up there with a Tariq Glenn, except I think Glenn won the Super Bowl, so obviously that plays a little bit different. But yeah, Ryan Kelly, I think he's one of the very, very good players in the history of this organization. Made multiple Pro Bowls and was a really good player. I mean, it does stink that it had to end this way, but the unfortunate part for him, but the fortunate part for us is the Colts have a 21-year-old center behind him who looked like he was pretty darn good last season. I was actually shocked when I was watching Tanner Bortolini's film last year on how much better it was than what my preconceived notions were going in. I mean, Bortolini was a guy where I thought his first year was going to be more of a redshirt type season. I didn't think he was going to see the field much this past year. He ended up seeing 6-7 games, and it was really good play. I mean, there's some things he needs to improve on, but I think everything you saw from Bortolini last year says that he should be the starting center next season. So I'm glad the Colts trusted that process in terms of, yes, we think Bortolini is ready. Unfortunately, that means we have to let Kelly walk, and it was certainly time for this breakup, but I still think Ryan Kelly, really good player. I think he's going to be really good with Minnesota. I mean, they're going to be moving on from Garrett Bradbury because it's funny. They signed him when they have a starting center on the roster.
Right.
So they're going to be cutting Garrett Bradbury
This is
here.
awkward.
Yeah, very awkward. But yeah, I mean, this opens the door for Tanner Bortolini to be the starter next season. And I think he's going to be fantastic. I think he's a really good young player. And if Tony Sperano's love says anything, because Tony Sperano loves him as well, I think Bortolini is going to be a center here, just maybe as long as Ryan Kelly was here, maybe the same type of career. I mean, we can only hope, but Kelly, fantastic watching him the past couple of years, especially in 2018 when I first got here. Him and Quentin Nelson were just awesome together. So it sucks to lose him, but Tanner Bortolini time now, and it's kind of what we all expected.
Yeah. So as someone from the media who is there in the locker room and stuff, I can't say enough about how much we appreciate Ryan Kelly and how willing he always was to talk after, during tough times and be revealing and kind of shine a light on things. So the appreciation for Kelly goes multiple layers. Another guy the Colts had to say goodbye to today was Dayo Odeyingbo, which in the last couple weeks, it seems like, Zach and I were kind of starting to hear the price tag and the demand that might be around for Dayo. And it was the Colts were not going to do that for a guy who wasn't a regular starter for them. So he moves on to the Chicago Bears, who were making some really big moves in the last couple of weeks. 3 years, $48 million, $32 million guaranteed, which is $16 million per year. That's a lot of coin. And I can't say, you pay free agents for what you expect them to do after you sign them, not for what they have done. So they basically expect Dayo to come in. Number one, he'll be a starter as long as he earns it, but basically play like a freak. Like the best things we saw from Dayo, I think, is what Chicago is expecting with regularity. And you pay a guy this much money to be kind of a 10-sack guy.
Yeah, here's the thing. I wouldn't have given Dayo Odeyingbo that money. In a nutshell, I wouldn't have given that to him. But that's the going rate for pass rushers on the open market. We're seeing other guys go for crazy numbers as well. And when you look at Dayo, he's a 25-year-old pass rusher that can rush inside and outside, had 11 sacks combined the last 2 seasons, was a former top 50 pick as well. And he was a rotational player. So if you can think that, hey, if we start him, he can be more productive, and we've already seen the flashes and the traits with him, and he's only 25, I totally get betting on him. His contract only takes him to his 28, until his year 28 or whatever. So, it's not even like you're taking him and you're paying him into his 30s. You're paying him into his late 20s at this point. So I understand why the Bears took that risk with him. Again, I probably wouldn't have done it for the Colts, but I totally get it for the Bears. The Bears needed some more pass rush juice, needed some guy who can rush inside and outside alongside Montez Sweat and now Grady Jarrett as well on that defensive line. So I hope Dayo's awesome there. Dayo had some really great flashes here, but it was certainly time as well. Just in terms of he never got his starting job here with the Colts, and then there were some ups and downs in his play with Indy. So different from Ryan Kelly, where it literally was just time to move on. This one, it felt like both sides kind of needed to be away from each other, I guess. Dayo needed a new start somewhere else. Whereas Kelly, the tenure had just gone on too long. Dayo, I think, just needed this fresh start somewhere else. So he got his bag. He's going to get a new opportunity and a really fun-looking team over there in Chicago. So I hope Dayo just kills it next season. And hopefully this Colts pass rush can replace the absence of Hurricane Dayo next season.
Yeah, so the Colts will definitely need a rotational defensive end now because, you're looking at Quidipe, Laiatu Latu, Tyquan Lewis, Isaiah Land is basically your group right now. So clearly they're not done. There is an area that Chris, negates every year. It seems like maybe this is it. Hopefully not. You do have Samson Ebukam coming back, but we've discussed he's going to be 30 plus coming off an Achilles. So anything he gives you is kind of a cherry on top. So they're definitely going to need to be able to replace someone like that. And the last one, it wasn't really a free agent departure, but over the weekend, the Colts did finally take a step in creating more salary cap space by cutting Raekwon Davis, which added $6.5 million to their cap space. The Colts, they're still searching for a backup defensive tackle, man. They haven't found a good third one yet. They've drafted them. They've used free agency, and it just has not worked. So Davis is out. Taven Bryan is a free agent. We got to hope they don't think he's some sort of lifeline once again this year. Let him go. Let him go. You hope Tommy takes another step, but I was really in on them going and getting BJ Hill from the Bengals, one of Lou Anarumo's guys. Get 3 30-year-old dudes rotating together and just getting the best out of them in the snaps they have. But Hill went back to the Bengals, so the search continues for a third defensive tackle.
Let's get like the 40-year-old Linval Joseph in here, and he can just eat up some snaps, like for like
What's
10
Ndamukong
snaps a
Suh up
game.
to?
Yeah, let's do that whole thing that the Eagles did a couple years ago. But yeah, Raekwon Davis, it didn't work out here. I'm glad the Colts gave themselves that out in the second year of his contract. I wish there wasn't any dead cap attached to it, but you can't win them all, I guess. So Raekwon Davis, I don't have as many loving words for Raekwon Davis, not because I don't like him, but just look, Dayo and Ryan Kelly were cool. Raekwon, thanks for the effort last year. Good luck in your next spot there.
All right. So coming up, this was just the first day of free agency. There's a whole lot more to accomplish. So Zach and I are going to tell you what we would like to see from the Colts in the coming days. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on all that action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening pretty much every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. There is no waiting around because I won it, so give it to me. You know what I mean? Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All righty, Zach. So as far as Colts internal free agents goes, there's really only one more guy floating out there who you think you may want to bring back at the right price. And that's our guy, Will Fries. I kind of thought that we would see him go somewhere today, whether it was coming back here to Indy or landing a big contract with like Jacksonville or Minnesota, Chicago, somewhere. But yeah, Fries is still out there.
Yeah, I would say it's like 95, 99% chance he's not going to be back. The Colts just don't have much room to work with after these big signings that they made today. Now, they can move some things around. They can free up some space by restructuring DeForest Buckner. They can even get a little bit more by restructuring Quentin Nelson. Those are the two contracts the Colts feel comfortable. Yeah, and Pittman as well. I specifically say Nelson and Buckner, though, because those two guys are going to retire Colts. They're never going anywhere. So the Colts feel more comfortable messing with those contracts, but they might view Pittman the same way as well. So I could see, I think that's a good one to throw in there too. So those three guys, they could really mess with those contracts and really create more space that way. But unless they do that, I just don't see Fries returning. The only reason I leave a little bit of a window open when it comes to Fries is maybe other teams are just terrified of that injury. Yeah. For whatever reason. I mean, we're seeing guys with bigger injuries get big contracts too, so I don't really think that's going to be the case. But if other teams are scared of that injury, I could see him returning on a 1-year contract to the Colts, get a healthy season under his belt, and then hit free agency again next year and really cash in. I don't think the Colts are expecting that. That's why they elected to bring back Braden Smith at the renegotiated deal instead of letting him go. But you can't close the door. I know the Colts haven't closed the door. And the one thing I do know about the Colts is they are one of the teams that are very comfortable with his injury and where he is with his injury. So they would welcome him back with open arms. It's just, I do fully expect, Tennessee is still throwing money at offensive linemen as we speak. Houston just freed up a ton of money on their offensive line by trading Laramie Tunsil. So I expect him to end up, I think, with Houston is where I would guess where he's going to end up, which would stink. We'd have to see him twice a year, but Will Fries, look, if crazier things have happened, so we can't close the door completely. I just think because the Colts made two big moves today, I don't think we're going to see like another one like with Fries getting 15, 16, 17 million dollars per year from the Colts. I just don't think they're going to do that. They kind of allocated some of their trench money to the defensive backs, and I don't think they're going to keep allocating it towards someone like Fries. Yeah,
and they've got to have money left over to sign whatever quarterback they're going to get, because surely they're not going to resolve this in the draft. So the quarterbacks are floating out there. Daniel Jones is the obvious one. Everyone is kind of waiting to see what happens with Jones, but it looks like the Colts are probably the leaders in the clubhouse on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Jameis Winston. Russell Wilson is still out there, but Jameis probably isn't, but there's guys out there who still want to compete to start. And certainly these guys know if you're coming to Indy, you're not going to be handed that job. Like Anthony is, they're going to give every excuse to have Anthony start unless he just flubs it in the summer. But yeah, quarterback's got to come soon. That doesn't seem like one that's going to linger too long.
Yeah, I think it'll be Jones ultimately. It'll end with Daniel Jones being the Colts' backup quarterback. But I wouldn't rule out them pivoting to a Jameis or a Trey Lance if they can't land Daniel Jones. Because Daniel Jones is apparently deciding between Minnesota and Indy. He might, at the end of the day, just reverse back to Minnesota and say, I'm just going to chill with this QB guru behind this young quarterback, which totally makes sense. But I could see it going either way with that. But then I think the Colts would pivot to a Jameis or a Trey Lance if they don't get Daniel Jones. I don't have much to say on Daniel Jones. Like, it's not going to here. I'll be honest. I don't like Daniel Jones as a quarterback. I think he's a second Mr. Risky. Okay. I think it's like, I'm not going to be very happy with that signing. But Chris Ballard gave me Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum. I can't complain too much, like it's fine. You can get a D in Spanish if you're getting the A's in math and all these other things. Like that's the way I'm viewing it as a parent looking at the report card. So I'm not going to be happy about Daniel Jones, but I'll take it because we got Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward. The thing I'm really curious about though, and we've had so many comments on it, is the Trey Hendrickson trade is what everybody is saying here, right? Trey Hendrickson trade. The Colts, I'm sure, are very like involved in the conversations around Trey Hendrickson. Again, they'd have to move around a ton of money to make that work. And the thing is, like, the Bengals, that they're trading Trey Hendrickson, right? People keep saying like, oh yeah, give them Quiddy to offset some of the money. The Bengals aren't trying to take on money if they're moving Trey Hendrickson. They're trying to get all of that money off the books, right? So they wouldn't take back a contract like Quiddy pay. So the Colts ideally would have to give them a second or third round pick to get Trey Hendrickson and then extend him at 30 to 35, maybe $40 million per year. And they don't really have that money right now. So they'd have to make a ton of things work to make Trey Hendrickson work in Indy. I think there's going to be other teams that are also going after him that have more cap space and more draft capital. So I wouldn't say that's likely, but I wouldn't say it's outside the realm of possibility. I'm just going to say it's very unlikely is what I would say here. So, we'll see if that happens. It's kind of like the Will Fries thing where like, I'm going to say like 95% chance it doesn't happen, but crazier things have happened in free agency. So, Hendrickson and Fries, I think those are pipe dreams right now. I think any kind of big move from the Colts going forward is kind of a pipe dream in free agency. Like, we got our two big moves that ate up most of the cap space, ate up most of the money. But I think we're going to see a handful of like minor, like they have a lot of roster spots they got to fill up. We're going to see some signings for sure.
Yeah. At this point, I don't know if a high dollar trade would take place. Cause again, if you get Hendrickson, you have to give him the contract as well. It's the whole reason he wants out of Cincinnati. Right. Because Ward and Bynum are two of the biggest contracts the Colts have ever done in free agency, if not the biggest under Ballard. That money, you'd have to create that room somewhere. And I don't know how much more room they're doing because they already did Braden Smith and Raekwon. Like you mentioned, you'd have to mess with Quentin, Buck, or Pittman basically to make that work. Probably all three of
them to make that work, honestly.
Maybe, yeah. So there's still some minor ones I was looking at, like Michael Mayer is one. Right. I think that's still alive and well, the tight end from Las Vegas. As far as compensation, you can get him for probably the 5th, 6th round pick at this point.
You might be too much with the 5th even there. I think like a 6 or a 7.
Yeah, honestly. I was being generous. You could get him with a late pick. He's not got a big contract. He was, I think, 35th overall pick. That's not that big. So I think that one's still doable. And then it gives you the flexibility to disaster scenarios, strike out at tight end in the draft. Hopefully not, but then you can grab someone in the 3rd or 4th round that you like. So I think that gives you a little flexibility going into the draft. There was one I liked before they got Ward, was Greg Newsome from the Browns. I'm sure they're done at corner now unless they draft someone, but there's just some minor stuff like that. Like if you're swinging for the fences, there's like Mark Andrews out there from the Ravens. He's been mentioned as being on the block a bit, but again, it's a high dollar situation.
Yeah, I don't see any more big moves coming from the Colts in terms of like massive moves. But again, they had 18 unrestricted free agents hit. They've only re-signed one so far in terms of Ashton Dulin. So they have bodies that they have to fill on the roster. So I do expect a handful of signings coming from the Colts still the rest of this offseason, even if they don't have a ton of space to work with. So I think one role in particular they're looking for is a pass rushing defensive tackle to replace what they're losing in Dayo Odeyingbo. So a couple names I saw, and these are not names I've heard the Colts connected to, but just names I saw when I was quickly scanning through as I was getting close to the time we were about to start recording. Jay Tufele, I think is his name, from Cincinnati. Maurice Hurst from Cleveland, Jonathan Bullard from Minnesota, and then Quentin Jefferson, of course. I'm going to be saying his name on this show until he's 50. He'll be retired, and I'll still be saying the Colts should go sign him as a player coach or something like that. I still think they're going to be looking for a third safety. I think Von Bell is like a near lock to be that third safety at some point in the offseason. I wouldn't be shocked with another veteran corner. I mean, if we look back at what Anarumo did in Cincinnati, or what Cincinnati did for him when they really changed that defense around, is they got the big signings like Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton, but they also took a risk on an Eli Apple, a 1 year, like $1.2 million contract, and Apple ended up being a starter for them. So I could see the similar type of situation with a guy like an Eric Stokes from Green Bay, super athletic, big, fast guy. Like, I could see something like that. And then I could see some minor signings on the offensive line and maybe a tight end like Manhurts, for instance, from the Giants. Like, I think that's a name that makes sense, and he's a good blocker. Maybe Mo returns, something like that. Like, you could see any of those being second or third wave signings for the Colts. But I think we have seen the end of the Colts in the first wave, outside of signing Daniel Jones at some point tonight or tomorrow, I'm guessing. But outside of signing Daniel Jones, I think we've seen enough of the Colts in the first wave. We're going to start seeing them more in like wave 2 and 3 and 4, the rest of the free agency. And then we're on to the draft, baby, where we take, Tyler Warren or Jahad Campbell there at 14.
Yeah, Chris has earned enough equity now to where he can just tell us all to shut the hell up until like the draft, basically. Like, he's done enough with this first day to buy him some time. So I agree. Like, there'll probably be 1 or 2 more moves made this week. I would count some internal ones. Yeah. But yeah, as far as splashy ones, you may not even recognize the names of the guys that come in. If you're me, give me my guy Nefi Sewell, the linebacker from the Saints, my special teams king, who might become a contributor at will, because Grant Stewart's out there. They got to replace Grant Stewart if they don't bring him back specifically. So they got to have that fireball.
Yeah, my closing remarks on today's episode will be like, look, this has been the home run free agency for me so far. I wrote a Charvarius Ward free agency piece like a week before he ended up getting signed by the Colts. I wrote about Cam Bynum in what I was hearing about free agency going into that. I even tweeted out this morning saying that Ashton Dulin was going to sign a 2-year, $8 million contract. I don't even remember tweeting that. So I've just been on a roll. So you guys just know that I'll be on this unbreakable hot streak if Quentin Jefferson somehow signs with the Colts. That will be the telltale sign.
4 years too late. We've been here every year, you calling for him to come to the Colts.
Right. So if Quentin Jefferson somehow ends up coming to the Colts, then you guys know I might be working for the Colts at this point if that happens. But you guys let us know in the comment section below what you think of Chris Ballard's massive signings for Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward. I know we're pumped about it here on Locked On Colts, but you guys let us know in the comment section. And thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft, because the draft is still right around the corner with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every single day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you're listening to your podcasts. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider, chat with us directly and get that insider scoop. Follow the link in our show notes. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at ZachHicks2 on Twitter. And also, I think on Blue Sky, because if Twitter's not working, go to Blue Sky.
I was gonna say if Twitter's gonna keep being a train wreck, please be on Blue Sky with us. Right. We've been posting.
Yeah, we're over there as well. And also subscribe to us on YouTube, where we listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow night.